What does it mean to love your neighbor? Welcome to The Pursuit, a Crosspoint City Church podcast that pursues a deeper dive into last week's sermon. I'm Will Goodwin, here with our lead pastor, James Griffin. And we're going to talk, so right before the podcast, we were talking about fitness and health, right? Because I've been trying to lose weight, and our producer, Ricky's been trying to lose weight.
Hold on, can we, you guys haven't been trying, you have been.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. You're down what?
Almost 30 pounds. See, Ricky's down 60.
Okay, so he's
killing it.
So whatever Ricky's doing, just do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, my kid...
30 pounds is significant.
It is. I have, like, my kid said something to me on Sunday, which shocked me, and my wife didn't say anything, which she normally does, but my clothes, like my son said that you can't wear that shirt anymore, it's too big. And I was like, what? That's crazy. I tried to go down a size, it didn't work yet. So I'm in this awkward in-between, wearing a blanket, something that's too tight. But we were talking about it because it's I hate it. Like, it's not fun, right? It's not enjoyable, right? The whole don't eat what you want, have to go. Like, I don't really understand the idea of people who like to exercise for the thrill of it, because it's not a thrill, right? It's not fun at all. But you were talking about, you watched something, and I just thought it was fascinating what you talked about.
Yeah, it was so good. There's, I don't know, some of you have probably seen it, but there are these video clips floating around on social media where a guy's in a big city and he's stopping dudes on the street who are clearly and obviously in good shape, and he's just asking them what they do. Hey, what's your plan? How many days a week are you lifting? All that kind of stuff. And so I came across a clip recently where he was asking a guy, I think the guy was like 57 years old, just shredded, you know. And the question he asked was, what's your motivation? And the guy said, there is no motivation, it's discipline. He said, there are plenty of days where I'm not motivated, but I do it. You just got to be disciplined to do it. And I thought that was so good. And I don't know, it made me think about how that's true in so many areas of life.
Oh, that's true.
Not just as it concerns physical fitness. I think it's true mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually. At times there's not motivation to do the things you know you need to do. You don't want to do them, but you do it anyway. It's discipline. You do it because you know you need it, and you know the payoff, and you know the fruit of it. And so I do think it's funny, though, but you're the guy that like hates this right now. I see I'm the opposite. I'm the weird guy that likes it.
Right. Oh, yeah, I hear about it. But for me, it was because we've been talking about All to Him for months, right? And he's sitting in meetings and going to vision summits and just listening to it. And I've had to ask myself the question long before the whole church heard the question of, am I giving my all for the one who gave his all for me? Yeah. And I'm like, well, I'm involved, and I'm giving, and I serve it. I do all these things. I'm disciplined and scripture reading, and like I've got all these things that are going okay. Like, where in my life do I actually need to make a sacrifice? And it's like, I don't want. I mean, it was a fight. Like it was like I was pushing back on it, and I just had to do it because, truthfully, like if I'm really going to ask that question for myself, like that's the thing that I don't want to do it, and I don't enjoy it. But that to choose this for His glory, right? To make a sacrifice and just spend more time leaning into Him through all of the struggle. It's exactly what I needed. Yeah.
No, I love that. Well, and you brought up All to Him and this discipleship journey that we're in the process of launching with our church right now. What I love about All to Him is it's just what you described. Like, this journey is about confronting us with the reality of our whole lives, our whole life surrender to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. Like, the thing that I find so compelling about what we're doing is we're trying to leave no stone unturned, right? It's like, we want you to examine every part of who you are and to ask that question. Does Christ have all of me? Or are there areas of my life that I'm holding back? And stewardship of the body is a big deal, man. I mean, I grew up in the church, and I grew up in the old school Southern Baptist church where gluttony was like the acceptable sin. It's like every other sin was railed upon, but then you got all these people who are just gorging themselves and, whatever. And I'm not trying to shame anybody when I say that, but stewardship of the body within Christianity matters immensely because I think it impacts what we're able to do in terms of mission and service and all sorts of things. So I don't know, man. I will say about you and Ricky and other guys that are doing what you're doing, crazy proud of you, bro. I know it's hard work. It does take a lot of discipline, but I think it absolutely matters. And I don't know. I think what you guys are doing, maybe it'll inspire some of our other listeners to take similar steps. And just know, if you hate it like Will, you guys can commiserate together, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's I mean, it's definitely been good. It's been a learning experience for sure. The being in awe to him and choosing to really ask and wrestle that question, I think about just the response, because we want 100% participation. So if everybody's really asking that question, it's going to be different for everyone.
Right.
It's going to be like you talked about it on Sunday. Like there's some people who are going to receive a calling that was never on their radar, right? That some or the thing, like for me, like I didn't want to do it. Like I knew that I needed to eat better. I just didn't want to do it. Like I didn't want to to sell my things and move to another country and be a missionary. Like I didn't want to do. I didn't want to eat right. You know.
Right.
And I just it's just like I for me in my head, it's like, okay, well here's the thing that I don't know. Like this is my vice.
Yeah,
so I don't. I'm not addicted to pornography. I don't have all these other issues.
Right.
So I've got this.
Right.
I just wear my issue at my waist. And so dealing with that, I think it's forced me to just come to grips with like a particular area in my life where I needed to let God intervene. And he's been yelling at me for years, and I just like, it's not that big. It can't be that big a deal. It's not. You said it. Like gluttony was the thing that like, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And I just made it and just finally let the Holy Spirit.
Well, I love it, bro.
Get through.
Food is awesome. Food's always the hardest part, I think. Food is awesome. But again, man, I just have mad respect for you for doing this. And I think there's so much value in what you said. It is going to be different for different people.
Yeah.
Like as we go on this journey together as a church, the Lord is going to confront different people with different things. And again, the question that really matters is, am I willing to surrender that? Am I willing to give that over to Christ? And even though I don't want to do it, am I willing to do it for the sake of discipline and fruitfulness? And because I know the payoff, and because I know that ultimately it's going to be the best for me, and it's going to give glory to God, and it's going to help other people. So yeah, man, I don't know. I pray that this simple conversation about this would maybe help somebody to go, okay, you know what, dang it, I'm going to take the step.
Yeah.
The thing that I know God's calling me to do, I don't want to do it, but I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And ultimately, there's freedom to be found in that. So go for it.
That's good. Well, the response, like we're second weekend to laying out the vision, and the response has been incredible.
It has.
Just in our congregation and our location, it's been huge. We've also got an outpouring of people who watching online or listening to this podcast that want to follow along, and they've messaged us to receive a booklet or a bracelet, and we've been sending that stuff out. And so just for anybody who maybe hasn't been paying attention or just needs to catch up, can you give us a recap of the message?
Yeah, for sure. Week? Yep. So this past week we talked about what it means to love your neighbors. And we went to the story in Luke chapter 10 of the Good Samaritan, the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's so interesting. At the beginning of the sermon, I just made the comment that you don't have to be a Christian to know this one. And you don't. I was reading a news story just this morning that labeled someone a Good Samaritan. So, I mean, even in the secular world, you see this. We're all familiar with this idea. A Good Samaritan is someone that helps someone. And so this story from Jesus, it's probably the most famous parable he ever told. But it happens within the context of this lawyer coming to question Jesus. He tries to have a theological debate with Jesus. Dumb idea. And he asks the question, what can I do to inherit eternal life? And basically it comes down to love God, love people, which none of us have done perfectly. And ultimately that reveals our need for the grace of God. But instead of coming to that point where this lawyer would go, okay, God, if that's what it takes, I'm in trouble because I haven't done that. He tries to justify himself by asking, who is my neighbor? And he's trying to create this distinction in this moment between neighbor and non-neighbor. And this is when Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's like the implication is that it's a Jewish guy who's been beaten and robbed and stripped and left half dead in a ditch on the side of the road. And these two religious guys come by, the priest and the Levite, and they do nothing. And then a Samaritan comes by, and he does what no one would have expected, because Jews and Samaritans hated each other in this day and in this culture. And so this guy meets the man right where he is in the condition that he's in, and he uses all of his own resources to serve him and to meet his need. And then I love the story because Jesus, he's so brilliant. He flips the question on its head after the parable, and he asks the lawyer, who was the neighbor? The lawyer wanted to know, who is my neighbor? And Jesus said, who was the neighbor? Clearly the answer is the Samaritan, the guy who showed him mercy. And so Jesus says to the guy, and he says to all of us, go and do likewise. And so the whole sermon was really about that, about loving our neighbors by being neighbors. And being neighbors ultimately means that we do for other people what Christ has done for us, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the podcast. And ultimately, as part of this All to Him discipleship journey, this is what we're setting out to do. We want to be neighbors to various groups of people within culture and society and our own communities. Again, we're going to talk more about that later in the podcast. But if you missed the sermon, I really need you to go watch or listen. Same as week one. Like this is the biggest thing God has ever asked us to do. And so if you're missing any of these, I just need you to get caught up.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things you talked about, and I'm excited to talk about this, but I want to tell a story first, right?
Okay.
You talked about there was a Good Samaritan test that happened in 1973.
Yes.
All right. But when I taught at North Carolina Christian, I was over at chapel, and we had this brilliant idea. It would never fly today, of putting someone who looked homeless like in the corner of one of the staircases by where all the students came in.
Okay.
And then we were going to see how the students responded and whether they would try to take care of, help the person. And then we were going to reveal that it was my brother in a costume during chapel to say, see, none of you guys did, except they did. Abigail Reichert, who's actually
That's amazing,
I know,
man.
right? Abigail Reichert, who was the daughter of Ike Reichert, who runs Must Ministries.
Yeah.
She stopped to try to help him and then recognized it was my brother. And it blew the whole thing up. The whole thing got destroyed because she tried to help and then realized this is not a homeless person.
This is staged.
Totally staged. Anyway, so 1973 Good Samaritan test. Talk about it.
Yeah. Well, this too was staged, okay? Basically, there was an experiment conducted, and the test subjects were students studying to become religious leaders. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention yesterday in the sermon is that before the experiment started, they actually assessed the students, and they had them take a survey. And the goal was to determine why they wanted to become religious leaders. Was it intrinsic? Was it extrinsic? So they did all this questioning, and then they broke them up into their respective groups. And one group, they told them that they wanted them to prepare speech about future job opportunities. And the other group had to prepare speech on this parable, the parable of the Good Samaritan, all right? Now, after preparing the speeches, they were told, you got to go to another building to give your speech. Now, this is where the students, they had no idea what was going on. They didn't know what was being staged. Well, before they left, they were divided into 3 subgroups, and they were told, group number 1, that if you leave right now, leave immediately, you're going to be early to give your speech. Second group, if you leave on time, if you leave immediately right now, you're going to be on time to give your speech. Group number 3, if you leave immediately, you're going to be late. So off they went. And unbeknownst to them, there was a stranger, like you're talking about your brother being staged, right? There was a stranger that they had staged along the walkway to this building, and it was a stranger in need. It's like they fell and got hurt or something like that. They're moaning, they're in pain. And the results were pretty interesting. So the early group, 63% of them stopped to help. 63%. So, I mean, almost 2/3. The on-time group, 45% stopped to help, so less than half. And the late group, this is crazy, only 10% of them stopped to help the stranger in need, even though they were about to give a speech on helping strangers in need, okay? Now, I use that experiment, and we can press in a little bit more to this, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts as well. What I said out of that, this is the problem with busy, right? This is the problem with busy. When we, and I think we as Americans are so good at this, oftentimes we wear busy as a badge of honor, which I don't think it should be a badge of honor. But when we fill our lives with clutter and we put stuff on our calendars and we have no space and no margin, that really is the temptation, is that you see suffering people or you see people in need and you just pass them by and you don't stop. Or even worse, you don't even see the need at all. You're so concerned with what's happening in your life and you're so consumed by what's happening in your world that you don't even take notice that there are people around you who need your help, right? And so this is the problem with busy. I'm going to add a couple of thoughts. You want to jump in here at all?
Well, no, keep going. I have some thoughts, but keep going.
Okay, all right. Well, I just noted 2 things, okay? On the other side of the problem of busy, I would say this is why it is important for all of us to build margin into our lives. So whether it's a day or blocks of time or just being intentional about not saying yes to everything that comes across your desk or everything that comes to your attention, but creating space so that you have enough margin to step in and to help when needed and as needed. But I would also say, as the people of God, we have to be open to what I would call divine interruptions. Divine interruptions. And you see this all throughout the ministry of Jesus. One example that I noted was Luke 8, where this guy named Jairus, who was a ruler in the synagogue, he comes to Jesus and his 12-year-old daughter is dying. And that just strikes a chord with me because I got a 12-year-old daughter at home. I can't imagine as a dad what that must be like for your 12-year-old girl to be dying. So he comes to Jesus and he's pleading with him, come to my house, you got to do something. You got to help my daughter. And so Jesus starts on his way, and as he's going to Jairus' house, he gets caught up in this crowd, and this woman with an issue of blood, she's been suffering for 12 years, She's pushing through the crowd, and she's believing if I can just touch his robe, maybe one of the prayer tassels on his robe, if I can just touch that, I will be healed. And so I just imagine she's pushing through the crowd, and she's swiping, and she barely touches the robe of Jesus. And the Gospel of Luke says that all the power goes out of him, that Jesus stops, and he's like, somebody touched me. And the disciples are like, what are you talking about? Everybody's touching you. And Jesus knows this is different. All the power went out of me. But I just think about Jairus in this moment. Here's Jesus in the crowd. He's supposed to be on the way to heal my daughter. And all of a sudden, an interruption takes place. And now Jesus is stopping. And he's doing something for this woman and engaging her in conversation and telling her that her faith has made her well and all of these things. And again, I just appreciate so much about Jesus. He was on his way to do this very, very important thing, but that didn't stop him from doing something else in the moment that mattered, from serving this woman who had suffered for so long. This is what I mean when I say divine interruption. If we're not open to that as the people of God, if we're not walking through life every day going, okay, God, if you want to interrupt my day with someone who needs help, with someone who needs hope, with someone that I can serve, I think we're missing the point of our lives. Like, this is why we're here, right? To put Christ on display, to serve people in need. This is what it means to imitate and emulate him in his world. And so we have to be open to moments like that if we truly want to be like Christ. So you said you had thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think going back to what you talked about earlier about when talking about fitness and having discipline, there needs to be something in your mind, in your heart, that causes pause, right?
Yeah.
Because we're always in a hurry, and you like I'm at fault with this. Probably anyone else. There's somebody on the side of the road changing a tire.
Yeah.
I had one point in time in my life said every time I see somebody in need, I'm going to stop, right? And then you just become callous because like, do you need help? No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like even to the point where it's like, hey, I'm sorry, do I have your consent to approach you to ask you if you need help? Like there's all these weird things in culture. You're like, oh, okay, well they're probably fine. They're probably fine.
Right.
And you just justify it. Because it's the small little whisper of like, I want you to do this thing, but I'm late.
Yeah.
I want you to do this thing.
Yeah.
But they're probably going to say no anyway. And
right.
there has to be something in our heart and our mind where we just kind of push past that, even if they do say no, like just to, and I think it even goes to like okay, they said no, but it's clear that they're just trying to be nice. Like just like, wouldn't you want someone to help you if you're in that situation?
Right.
Anyway, I think that to create some kind of, maybe discipline's not the right word, but an awareness of something that kind of forces you to just kind of step into to attune to the Holy Spirit saying, hey, I want you to go do this thing.
Yeah.
That's going to disrupt everything else you've got going on.
Right. Well, I think it's intentionality.
Okay.
I think it's us being intentional to open our eyes and look for the needs that exist around us. I think it's getting up every day and going, okay, Spirit of God, open my eyes to see the needs, slow me down so that I can serve people and help meet needs. And I do. I think it's awareness. I think it's intentionality. I think it's us remembering our purpose in the world. But even to your point, we just talked about this in group last week in my group, just about how we as Americans are so bad about receiving help from people. And I do think that is a real problem. And I think it's pride. It requires deep humility to say to another person, I need you. I need the help that you offer. So even as a group, we just talked about the importance of like being honest and real with each other. And if we need something, asking for help. So we had that conversation Tuesday night. I needed help at my house this weekend, moving some furniture and taking a bed apart. And so I texted a buddy of mine in group. I was like, hey, man, will you come help me? And didn't think anything about it. I'm like, if we're going to talk about this as a group and say we want to be these people, then I'm not going to feel bad about asking.
Yeah.
And I don't want other people to feel bad about asking me to show up and help either. So you're right, man. It is a two-way street, you know. We've got to be intentional about seeing needs and meeting needs, but we also have to be humble enough to receive help when we are the person in need. Yeah. So it matters for sure.
Well, and another word that comes to mind is compassion. Yeah. I just listened to Malcolm Gladwell tell a story, a whole bunch of stories, and one of them that stuck out was this gentleman or two people in a concentration camp that broke out, and there was like 9 different acts of kindness from 9 different groups of people that ultimately led them to a place of safety, like in Nazi-occupied Poland, where they had to walk up to a total stranger and like, do you have food? Yeah, that's clear. Like this person's not from around here, right? And it's obviously, it's dangerous for me to even be talking to them, and all these people who are willing to stop whatever they were doing and to help, and all these different interactions that led them to a place of safety. And I think about like when we're empathetic to someone's tragedy, when we're recognizing what's going on, when we're aware, when we're intentional, like there needs to be a spirit of compassion. So I guess let's just talk about that. Like, have you seen in your own life, or how have you seen the Lord deepen your compassion for others? In your own life.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about just specific moments and specific stories, and I think for me, man, if I can point to a moment in time where I'm like, the Lord did something radical in me to deepen my compassion, empathy. If I can even think back to when generosity went to a different level in my life, it was the very first time I traveled to West Africa. Okay, Burkina Faso. Talked about Africa a little bit in my sermon this week. I helped to lead an organization called Engage West Africa. So I spent a lot of time there over the years. The first time I ever went, though, 2008, rocked me to the core. All right, I went with a group of guys from my church where I was serving on staff at the time. And we were out in these bush villages the entire time we were there, just going village to village, and we were meeting with church leaders and elders about water. Because in Burkina Faso, one of the main issues is water. People have a lack of clean water to drink. And so as we're traveling from village to village, the missionary that was hosting us was telling all kind of crazy stories, you know. And one of the things that he told us were, he just talked about families having to choose which of their children to keep alive and which of their children to let die, because these parents didn't have enough food to feed their kids and they didn't have enough resources to go around. And I just remember listening to this on a drive, and I'm like, there's no way. There is no way that's real, that parents are having to pick a kid to live and a kid to die. And then we show up to this village to meet with a local pastor about drilling a clean water well, like property of his church, whatever. And we're sitting in the courtyard of this church, these 2 little boys running around. And one of the little boys, you could tell, man, he was very well cared for. He was well fed. He had great clean clothes on, you know, the whole deal. It just looked good. There was another little boy, no pants on. His belly was swollen due to malnutrition. His hair was falling out. He had snot caked on his face. Like, you could tell, like the kid was not being taken care of. And the missionary at one point called us over. He said, you see those 2 boys? He said, those are both sons of the pastor. He said, that's what I've been telling you about. He said he doesn't have enough resources to take care of both of his kids. And he knows if he splits the resources, both of his sons will die. And so that one he's taking care of, and that one's getting basically what's left. And dude, it broke me, like absolutely broke me. And I just remember coming back home from that trip. My wife thought I had lost my mind, because I was so disgusted with how we were living. I was so disgusted with the excess. I was so disturbed by what I perceived to be our lack of generosity. You know, here we are living in an area of the world where we have so many resources. And I'm across the world for a week seeing these people that don't have what we have. And to know that here we are, a lot of people where we live don't even know this is still going on in the world in which we live. And we have all that's necessary to do something about it, but we're not doing anything about it. And it just broke me, man. And so God really used that experience to deepen my compassion, to increase my generosity. I mean, that was where, like, my heart for missions and my heart to get our church involved in missions, it really kind of all goes back to that moment. And I'm grateful for it. You know, I think when you go and see something like that, you then become responsible to do something. And so ever since then, man, I mean, my family, we've just made it a point to do something. And I know we can't help everybody, but, you know, we can help somebody. And I think if we all just made it a point to help somebody, the world might be a different place in that regard.
Yes, man.
I don't know. You got any examples of that in your life?
Well, I'm not going to beat being radically changed by helping starving kids in Africa, but I'll try. There have been several moments, I think, in my life where just being challenged to do something I didn't want to do, to help someone I didn't necessarily want to help. And even like at home, my own family, my wife's side of the family, nephews, nieces that just didn't have a great home life, had their mother would just drop them off and disappear, you know, different fathers, different kids. And like, there's just, it was crazy to see people living a way that I just couldn't comprehend. Yeah. And then the opportunity is like, they have nowhere to go. We just had a brand new baby. Would you take them in to our house? Yeah. And it's like, yes. Right. I have to say yes. Yeah. You know, and that's it's so hard. I will say though, I think that one of the biggest life-changing experience for me was when I was pastoring in Cherokee County. Was dealing with a homeless population. I remember reading in the paper they did a survey of all the homeless people in Cherokee County, and they counted 13. And I remember reading that like, wow, we could do that.
13?
Yeah, just 13.
13 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I knew where the tent camps were, right behind Walmart, behind the movie theater, behind a little shopping center right outside of downtown. And I was like, I would count them like I've seen them, you know? Yeah. But working with Kendall over at Must Ministries, and really a friend of mine, Daniel Stansel, because he would actually take his kids, and they would go and they'd bring firewood and they'd bring food in these tent cities. And I'd never done that. I'd never gotten out of my car and wandered into the woods till you found the tents where people were living and go have a conversation with people. And it shook me. Like, they're people. Yep. They need help. You know, some of them want to live that way, but most of them don't. And there's way more than 13. It's just who answered the survey?
Right,
you know, who did you actually stop and have a conversation with? And just connecting with people who, this is what they did every day. Yeah. They would walk out. They would open up their building when it was cold. Cherokee County doesn't have any kind of shelter, and so churches would do what they could when it was freezing. One church in particular made a makeshift shelter and had to shut it down because of all the red tape. And it was so frustrating that you're trying to do something, and then you've got all these bureaucrats and governments. Like, there's people out here, it's below freezing. Yeah. And just seeing it and being in it and being around people who care about it enough to take time out of their schedule and bring their family and just to talk about it and to work with them. And just walking beside them and then walking with these people to help them find jobs, help them find places to live. Right. It was it was extremely, extremely humbling.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so much value in this, and I would just say to all the people listening too, this is why it is so important for you to take steps of faith on this journey. I mean, God's going to call all of us to do different things, but I think through those experiences, what God wants to do in our lives is deepen our compassion and empathy for people. So whatever it is He's calling you to do, you got to do that, whether it's investing in foster care or fighting for unborn children or getting involved at the Compassion Center, helping to serve the homeless in our city, whatever it is, all of these compassion ministries that we do, if you want to see the Lord deepen your compassion, you have to get involved somewhere. Yeah. And it might be hard and it might be uncomfortable, but it is through those experiences that our empathy deepens. Like, until you really see and understand what someone's going through, you can't empathize. You can sympathize. Oh, I feel sorry for you. Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. But until you enter in, I said this in the sermon, compassion means to suffer with. Until you enter into the pain of another person and use your resources to serve them and meet their needs, you can't really understand what it is that they're going through. And so to deepen your empathy, you've got to step in and experience some of these things. Let me just keep pushing you. Whatever God's calling you to do that. Yeah. Do that.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear that this is something that God really wants us to do. Just about every single book of the Bible, there's a passage somewhere that talks about helping those in need, taking care of the orphans, the widows. It is not something that God forgot to tell us about.
Oh, no.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of the point, right?
Yeah, right. Now, one of the things you talked about, one of the things you said is that what we're called to do is stop assessing others and start assessing ourselves. That's really what we've been talking about. Yeah. So if we do that, if we stop trying to figure out who's our neighbor and just be a neighbor to those in need. We say that, right? We talk about these things, but it's easier said than done, right? So lay it out for us.
So how do we do it?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, and I think back to the sermon in the text, this is the brilliance of Jesus when he flips the question. And this is really what he's doing. You know, the lawyer's asking, who is my neighbor? And Jesus says, who was the neighbor? And what he's forcing the lawyer to do is what you're talking about, to stop assessing other people and to start assessing himself. Stop trying to figure out who's the neighbor. Just be a neighbor, man, right? And so two things that I talked about in the sermon that I just want to recover and we can unpack a little further. First, if we're going to get this right, we have to remember the gospel. We have to remember the gospel. This was so interesting. Yesterday, we had lunch after church with our elders and their spouses. And I was sitting there with a couple of our guys, and one of our elders was like, man, I have never heard the parable of the Good Samaritan taught through a gospel framework. You know, because one of the things I talked about in the sermon yesterday was how the gospel story is the bigger story behind the story. Like, yeah, it's the story of the Good Samaritan, but really it's the story of the gospel. Just this reality that we're not the heroes. We're not the Good Samaritans in Luke 10. We're the guy in the ditch, you know? Our sin has beat us up, robbed us of life, left us for dead. Nothing we can do about it. All of our religious efforts will pass us by. But praise God, Jesus came. And he met us where we were in the condition that we were in and used all of his own resources to serve us and to save us. And so really this call to love our neighbors is simply a response to what Christ has done for us. As I said it in the sermon, the work's bigger than the work. The point is not be a good Samaritan. The point is be like Jesus. Follow Jesus, emulate Jesus, represent Jesus, all in response to the finished work of Jesus on your behalf. So again, it's interesting, you know? So I got elders sitting at the table like, I've never heard anybody teach it like that, which is crazy to me because it's not like I came up with something new, you know? It's there. It's the story of our faith. But when I say to get it right, we have to remember the gospel. The gospel story is the motivation for loving our neighbors. We don't love our neighbors just to love our neighbors. Like there's something underneath it that we cannot miss, and it's what I just described, that in response to what Christ has done for us, we would do the same for other people. And so this is it, man. If you're gonna get this right, you got to ultimately remember about yourself that you were in the ditch once, and that Jesus came to get you out when he shouldn't have, and because he did that, you can't leave people in the ditch either. And you got to meet them where they are, no matter who they are or what they've done, and use all of your resources to meet their needs and to serve them and to point them to Christ, the only one who can ultimately save them. So it starts by remembering the gospel. That's number one. And then number two, we have to remember the God-given value of human life. And this is so huge, okay? I'll say what I said in the sermon again. We do not love our neighbors because the government tells us to. And we do not love our neighbors because some sociological ideology demands it. And I said it over the weekend, but I do think this is the hypocrisy of our culture, Will, is that, you know, we live in a nation where we've become very pagan, very secular, very post-Christian. And so you got people like that who deny the reality of God while also at the same time attempting to place value on human life apart from him, and it does not work. It's just so silly, right? If we would say, well, we're just the result of evolutionary processes and, you know, we're just a result of this big cosmic accidents, this great coincidence that took place. And, you know, all of these things, we were all once single-cell organisms that evolved over time, and here we are today. And, okay, well, who assigns value to human life then? If that's like the story of humanity, who assigns value to human life? Well, the answer is no one. And at that point, does it really matter that we love each other? I would say no. So for a group of people to get together and go, but we have to or we should, well, why am I morally obligated to love anyone if there's no one outside of humanity placing value on human life? It's crazy. It's very, very illogical. So as Christians, and again, I always say this, we got the best story. I think our story makes the best sense of human life. As Christians, we believe that God created all people and that we have been created in his image. That's Genesis 1:27. We've been created in the Imago Dei. And because of that, every human life possesses intrinsic worth and value. And human life is set apart from all other life because of this. Like we're different than every other living being in existence, okay? Human life matters most to God, which is why we love people, because the value of human life is different. And so if we're going to get this right, we have to recognize that, okay? We start with the gospel. We understand what is true about all humanity because every person's been made by God in his image. And when you understand those things, you come to realize, well, everybody's my neighbor. I don't even have to ask that question, who's my neighbor? Every person on the planet is your neighbor. And the question that matters more than any other question is, what kind of neighbor are you being? Are you being a Christ-like neighbor? Are you being a good neighbor? Are you being a selfless neighbor? Are you being a generous neighbor? So again, it's about self-assessment, not about the assessment of other people. And I think all of us would do well to take this kind of assessment on a very regular basis to determine what kind of neighbors we're actually being.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and even thinking about when you talk about the greatest commandment, right?
Yeah.
That love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Like that's like, are you doing that?
Yeah.
Right? Because when you get to the second part, which is supposed to be a little easier, let's love our neighbor. Well, you're not truly going to love your neighbor unless you're really loving God.
Correct.
Because you're not going to love them the way that they need to be loved.
That's right.
Or you're not going to go as far as you need to go.
Yeah.
Until you're loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yeah.
So that self-assessment is super important.
Yeah.
All right, now this component of the all to him discipleship journey,
right?
We focused on the cities, so we want to talk about cities, right? So share with us what we're planning to do. What's already started?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is in the sermon, I spent most time talking about the work that would fall under our cities, right?
Right.
As I was describing who we want to be neighbors to. And so, yeah, we'll kind of unpack some of this and kick it around a little bit. I just noted I didn't talk about all of this in the sermon, but I did capture it for the podcast today. So I'll say it how I've been saying it, and then if we want to dig into it a little bit further, man, just stop me and we can talk about it, okay? So one of the things that we're going to do is launch a new location, and I'm super stoked about this. You know, we got a few hundred people driving into Cartersville every single week to come to church from south of us toward Ackworth, Kennesaw, Marietta, that area, North Paulding even, you know, kind of the north parts of Dallas where Dallas and Ackworth come together. And so we've been talking and praying about sending those people out back into their local community to reach more people with the gospel. I mean, we believe that we're all in full-time ministry, that God's called every single one of us to be missionaries. And that is why we do locations, is because we want to send people out to be missionaries, you know. It's not just about doing more gatherings in more places. It's about accomplishing the mission of Jesus in greater ways. So that's one. We're also going to expand our current locations, and that means a few things. We're trying to figure out property for Adairsville. We're trying to figure out a long-term plan for the property here in Cartersville. Those things are in motion, by the way. So if you're a part of our church and you attend one of those locations, just know we're figuring that out at the moment, trying to at least. And then in Rome, one of the things that we've been burdened about is bringing on a student minister, because we know that if we're going to keep reaching families in that city, we have to reach the next generation. We need a leader to do that. So, hey, if you're listening and you're passionate about student ministry and you feel that you have a call on your life from God to do something like that, hit us up and reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. We need somebody in that city as soon as possible so that we can get this going in greater ways. One thing that I'm super stoked about, Will, as part of this, and I gave an update this weekend, we are now, it has been confirmed, launching a Crosspoint City Church location at Hays State Prison in North Georgia.
Yeah, we both talked about that last week.
Yeah.
We didn't know when we were recording this last week.
Yep.
And we both were super excited about it.
That's right.
And then almost like, I think the next day.
It was Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday of this past week. Got the official confirmation that this is happening. You know, one of the hardest prisons in the state of Georgia. There's over 1,100 men housed there. And we're going to go, man. God's sending us. I'm still blown away that he is entrusting to us a responsibility and an opportunity like this. So let me just talk a couple of next steps for anybody that's listening that might want to be a part, okay? So here's the thing. We're going to be meeting at a really weird time. So Monday mornings is when we're going to do this. And we just told the folks at Hays State, like, whatever day and time you need us to do it, we'll make it work. So it's going to be Monday mornings. And so if you are a man listening and you want to be a part and you somehow have Monday mornings free, I don't know, maybe your job allows it, or maybe you're retired or whatever, you have Monday mornings free and you want to be a part, we'd love to talk to you. We're trying to get a group of guys into training in early December because we got to get everybody that's going to be a part of this through this particular training There's one happening December the 2nd. So we're trying to recruit guys immediately so that we can get them through this and get this thing up and going shortly after that. So I would say if you were interested in being a part of this Crosspoint City Church location at Hays State, email us at info@crosspointcity.com, and we will follow up with you about that training and being a part of this team. Super stoked about it. Fighting for the unborn. Talked a little bit about abortion and the fight that we're getting involved in the sermon yesterday. And it's kind of threefold, as I explained. I mean, we want to fight for the lives of preborn babies. We also want to fight alongside moms and dads who are thinking about making a decision to abort their babies. And then we want to come alongside moms and dads who've already done that. And we want to take part in a healing process and a restoration process because we believe that God has grace for all people, even people who've made that decision, you know? I mean, I was very clear about it, tried to be very clear when I preached it. Abortion's sin because life begins in the womb and every life possesses intrinsic worth and value, and even those unborn babies are image bearers of God. And so if you kill a baby in the womb, you are killing an image bearer. It is murder. It's a sin. But God forgives even murderers. And that grace is available to people who've made a decision like that, and forgiveness is available in and through the person and work of Jesus Christ. And we want to make sure moms and dads know that. You know, I'll share this story, and I don't think she would matter. I won't say names, but I was talking to a lady in our church recently who I think was like 18 years old, made this decision. And she came to me recently and she was like, hey, I want to get involved in this fight. She said, I've lived under the weight of that decision for so many years now, and I feel like I need to tell my story and that other women need to know the lies of the abortionist movement.
Wow.
And she said, I want to get involved. And she said, I've experienced the grace of God in my life. I've experienced forgiveness. And she, her kids were with her. She's got like a few other kids, and she pointed to them and she said, that's the sign of God's forgiveness in my life.
Wow.
Is that God would bless me with other children, and I want to get involved in this fight. Prime example that God has grace for all people if you will turn in faith to Jesus. So we want to be neighbors in all of those ways. Something that we've already got going, we're going to serve families with kids with special needs. This is up and going in Cartersville already. We've created environments. We've got a great team serving these kids and serving these families. But as part of this journey, we want to expand this ministry to Rome and Adairsville as well. So I would say if you are at one of those locations and this is something you feel called to serve this amazing, amazing community of people, man, we would love to talk to you. Let your location pastor know. We got plans. It's going to be coming. And then a couple of others, we're going to invest in foster care. And this is super cool, man. As we've been talking foster care in recent weeks and months, we got families in our church that are so fired up about it, they're not even waiting on us. They're just like, all right, hey, man, we're going to go through the process. And we got families going through the process with defects right now. One of our pastors on staff, Clay Willis, is walking with these families. We've already had families come and saying they want to be a part of this support network that we're building. It's been absolutely incredible. But I will say, if you are interested in this, we do have an interest night coming up on January 21st, so right after the turn of the year. And if you're thinking that God might be stirring you to foster kids or to be a part of the foster support network that we want to build within our church, put that date on your calendar. Save it. Sunday, January 21st, that night, we will have an interest night, and we're going to get more information to you. But again, the goal is just to raise up an army of people who can take kids in and care for families who are taking kids in. And then finally, we're going to operate the Compassion Center, and man, that thing is almost finished. I think the interior of the building is pretty much done. They're having to finish the exterior of the building, and so it's coming along. And as part of that, we're also going to have this mobile unit on the road, the mobile medical clinic. And as part of this journey, we're hoping to buy a second mobile clinic as well so that we can do dental services. And the goal of all of this, meeting medical needs, dental needs, providing counseling, serving women being rescued out of sex trafficking, mentoring kids, teaching adult literacy, caring for the homeless. The goal of all that is to really get the gospel to more people who need it. We want to address physical needs and emotional needs and mental needs so that we can also address the spiritual need, which is the greatest need of all. So, man, I can't tell you how pumped I am about all that God is calling us to do, all the work that he's putting before us. And again, all of this is a response to the finished work of Jesus on our behalf. We just want to help get people out of the ditch, if I can say it that way.
Yeah, I'm fired up.
Me too.
I get excited every time you talk about it, really because you keep telling stories. This even goes back to what we talked about last week, that you look at this list and it's like, this is just one component. Like we've got our church, our cities, our world. This is one component. You look at that list and it's long.
Yeah.
But I remember when you first started talking about this and you talked about, like, just as an example, Hays State Prison.
Yeah.
Or, well, it wasn't Hays State Prison. It was prison location. Where? I don't know.
Yeah.
How are we going to do it? I don't know. What's it going to look like? I don't know. Who's going to lead it? I don't know.
Yeah.
And just to watch God move in this and to see, like, the conversations with people like, I'm ready to go. Families that are jumping ahead because it's like, hey, we're ready. Women who are like, I want to be a part of this fight. Like, God is just opening door after door after door. Like, he's done all the work. We're just catching up.
That's right. That's exactly right. He has gone before us in all of it. Man, it's so crazy. I have so many stories that I could share right now, but maybe I'll save them for a different time. I will just say this for what it's worth. It's unbelievable to me, the people that God keeps bringing and putting in place so that the doors can be opened for us to do all of these things that he's calling us to do. That's the beauty of this. It's like we haven't made any of this happen.
Yeah.
We haven't coerced any of this. Right? It's just, hey, man, let's pray and let's seek God's face. And God, what do you want us to do? And God, here's what we think we're hearing from you. And if that's right, then make a way. And he's made a way. For all of it. And so we praise God for it. And we're just trusting him in it, not only to supply the people, but to supply all the funds and all the resources. We still got this $16.5 million goal hanging over our heads. But again, here's just what I'm trusting. And I'm going to talk more about it this weekend. If these are really the things that God's calling us to do, as we seek his kingdom, he will provide through his people. And I am trusting and believing that.
Entirely. He's been faithful so far. There's no reason to doubt that he's not going to be through all of it. So
100%.
Huge. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, look, that's a good place to kind of wrap it up for today. If you want to learn more about All to Him, or you would like a discipleship guide to follow along with us, you can email us at info@crosspointcity.com or send us a direct message on any of our social sites, Instagram, Facebook. Give us your address and we will send you a packet free of charge. Thanks for listening. And as you go, we want you to know we love you, we're here for you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Pursuit with James Griffin. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll never miss an episode. If you have questions about the message, the scriptures, or faith in general, you can send them to us by texting the word question to the number 22722. For more information about our church or this podcast, please visit crosspointcity.com or follow us online at Crosspoint City. If you found value in this podcast, we would love it if you took time to like it and share it with a friend. Doing that will help more people know and follow Jesus. And finally, we want to invite you to join us each week for one of our gatherings in person or live on YouTube. We hope to see you soon.